Escalating tensions in the Middle East have intensified in the recent period. This ongoing conflict raises regional security concerns and furthermore increases calls for the international community to intervene. Join our special coverage on Qnews, where we explore the latest updates in Syria and Israel tonight. We start with Syria, where a Syrian delegation led by newly appointed Foreign Minister Asad Hassan al-Shibani has arrived in Riyadh for his first official visit abroad. The delegation also includes Defense Minister Morhav Abu Qasra. This visit took place less than a month after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his French counterpart Jean-Noël Barrot have discussed developments in Syria, focusing on supporting Syrians in building a better future and reducing instability. Blinken emphasized a Syrian-led political transition, respect for human rights, and civilian protection, especially for minorities.
Impressed upon everyone we've been in contact with the importance of helping find Austin.
The Syrian Interior Ministry has announced a large-scale sweep of neighborhoods in Hims in coordination with military operations. The sweep aims to apprehend war criminals and armed individuals refusing to surrender or comply with reconciliation centers. Residents in Wadi al-Dahab and Akrama were urged to stay indoors during the operation. Earlier, a curfew was imposed in Talbisa and Damascus. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has announced that Ukraine is preparing to restore diplomatic relations with Syria. This follows Ukrainian Foreign Minister's visit to Syria on December 30th. Zelensky also mentioned plans to boost exports to Lebanon in 2025, highlighting Ukraine's intent to strengthen international cooperation and expand trade in the coming year. For further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we're joined from Amman by the political analyst Adel Mahmoud. Mr. Adel, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And first off, alongside the Israeli incursion into the buffer zone in the Golan, the Israeli occupation forces have started a new chapter of violations in Syria by carrying out an incursion in Qneitra in southern Syria. And from here, I would like to ask you, why does the Israeli occupation continue to penetrate Syrian territory?
Good evening to you and your dear viewers. Firstly, Israel has several objectives. Firstly, new occupations, and the domination of the strategic sites along the level of the water, as well as the Al Yarmouk and Al Litani rivers and in Reef Damascus. And the strategic goal is studying the Levant area to barricade the peace for the water and to invest in the fall of the Al-Assad that never done this before, whereas the legitimate government. But in this area, what is called that far from Al-Julan and to sponsor the Al-Ulwi component in Reef al-Suwaida wal-Dir'a, and demands from the Syrian to enter Al-Julan and to expand the space of Israel against the Syrian integrity. It was better for the new government to start with the preservation of the Syrian integrity and to confront to such an blatant aggression.
Yes, sir, speaking of the new government, the Syrian Interior Ministry has carried out a sweep of neighborhoods in Hims to apprehend war criminals and armed individuals. How do you view these security operations being carried out by Syria?
The file of the disarmament would require firstly that the army that is awaiting to be rebuilt, as you know, that has been dismantled, more than 150,000 soldiers. So we are talking about a very complicated fights in the eastern Syria, such as the Kurds, to have a resettlement between the statement in Turkey in favor of the integration of the new army, and this fight would require international efforts and time, as there are presence of factions as the ISIS fighters hasn't been ended yet, and to surrender the arms of the soldiers of Syria, and there is a reconciliation. And I think this file, with respect to the army, is in a very tangled, as in the statement recently that is premature to surrender arms within Al-Suwaida area. That gives a very dangerous indicator that hasn't been dominated in full within Syria. That is, we're about to run uncertainty in the issue of the dismantlement. If there is no seriousness of the international community to assist the new regime, as been supported before, even though it has been legitimized, even the HTC is in the terrorism list, without the provision of security, won't be having a reconstruction and economy. So the real picture hasn't been crystallized yet. And what is the form of the new army? Is it full Sunnis? Excluded the Alawis and the Kurds? And there are a great question mark.
Sorry for interrupting you, but delving more into the Syrian internal matters from a diplomatic perspective, what do you think of the Syrian foreign minister's first visit to Saudi Arabia?
From my perspective, without the Arab dimension, Turkey has already been embraced the new equation of Syria, and without the prominent, dominant countries such as Egypt, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, and there is an uncertainty from the United States of America that laid out a new equations, and there's a big concern about it. But I think that the visit following security measures by Saudi Arabia, and I think that the provision of the new Syria of fuel for 1 year, as stated, but without it, the Gulf support won't be having a reconstruction. That's why they went for some sort of reconciliation with the Arab countries, our political luring.
Now, sir, let's shed light on the international community. How can the international community help Syria stabilize the situation from your point of view?
Steps has been taken in Al-Aqaba summit as its outcomes was the first momentum by the international community politically. As I say, it's a pre-attempt to the political momentum into Damascus. As I mentioned, the international community should have a role in assisting the new regime through the national conference, the new constitution, and certainly the non-intervention and the elections to be earlier point as much as possible. I think to close the Syrian file without a bit going through divisions and civil war. And I think that along with the international community, have succeeded, firstly, to generating in the new program that al-Shara wouldn't have any negative holes. Step by step, the international community hope to have a stable Syria. So the political discourse is being given by the new government, Mohammed al-Bashir and al-Shara. It's an assuring the international community and to move from where I think that the movement would start by the point of disarmament and sparing Syria from division and the reconstruction that would require a real roadmap to move forward into a new Syria.
Now, sir, in light of the new wave of appointments in the Syrian army, including the appointment of a new Syrian defense minister, what's your opinion on this?
I may say that the 3 months is, of course, of one spectrum, and they show some justifications, but if there is not having an acceptable by all the spectrum from the Alawi, the Christian, and the Alawi, to lead the army that has an experience and to be an umbrella without having a stable and real inclusive Syrian army, we might have a setback if the continued justification based on i.e. that they have a question mark, and when you enlist foreigners in a new Syrian army and some are requested by our different countries. Now you would repeat the Iranian experience of the enlisting some non-Syrian nationalities, and I think if we don't have a real Syrian army that would embrace Syrian as a whole, and the political process would have some setbacks. So it is a must. We should have political figures, even if it is not a descendant, should be have a full approval and a consensus by all the spectrum.
Now, sir, sorry for interrupting you. So, the Israeli foreign minister has stated that they're monitoring the situation in Syria closely and they won't allow the scenario of October 7 to be repeated. In light of this, how do you foresee the security situation in Syria in the coming period?
Which with foreign minister? You mean
the Israeli foreign minister has stated that they're monitoring the situation closely in Syria and they won't allow the scenario of October 7 to be repeated. So in light of this statement, how do you foresee the security situation in Syria in the coming period?
Let's talk simply to the viewers. Israel knows very well that the USA, who brought with unconditional and the security is on a red line, al-Shara has said with the issue of the peace process, by sending an assuring message to Israel. We don't have an extremist government, as the West know that. Before the visit in Damascus, that supervising a new political order and rearrange the matters in Syria, Israel do not need any justifications. And from the first hour, bombarded and entered and prevent and broke the disengagement agreement. This Israeli policy practiced by Israel As you all know that historically Israel if entered a place never get out. Historically said so. So we shouldn't let this happen that would require from the international community. Maybe up till now there is no statement or enough confrontation steps against Israel by entering the factions with so they know that the Shari, the new man, is going to have a peaceful Syria, and all the files of the position in militarily by Israeli is provided for agreement, and so Syria will control the area from its side to have normalization from the built countries such as Iraq and Syria, what is quoted as the
Thank you,
economic
sir,
peace.
so much for your insight. Sorry for interrupting you due to shortage of time. That was the political analyst Adel Mahmoud. Thank you so much for being with us. Moving to Israel, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been released from hospital after his prostate surgery ended successfully. The hospital said in a statement that the Prime Minister's doctors reported upon his discharge that his condition is stable and that he is recovering satisfactorily from the surgery. He still has a recovery period ahead of him where his condition will be continuously monitored. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced that a new conscription law aims to draft tens of thousands of Haredim. He added that a draft bill addressing Haredi military service exemptions will be presented to the Knesset to prevent a coalition crisis. Katz seeks 50% Haredi enlistment, aligning with a poll showing 68% public support for mandatory service. The law aims for fairer participation and resolves tensions between Haredi parties and the government. Former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has announced his resignation from parliament. That came after being dismissed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in November amid disputes over the Gaza war. In a televised statement, Gallant emphasized the need to reassess and choose a direction to achieve goals that reflect his battlefield philosophy. The Israeli government has established a ministerial team to address potential war crime accusations against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The team is reportedly exploring ways to pressure the International Criminal Court to revise its stance, with discussions focused on diplomatic measures to counteract any legal consequences tied to alleged human rights violations in Gaza.
Support of our Christian friends around the world. You've stood by our side. You've stood by our side resiliently.
For further analysis on the current situation in Israel, we're joined from Ramallah by the writer and researcher Ahmed Zakarna. Mr. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us on Q News. And first off, can internal pressures on Netanyahu lead to a ceasefire agreement in Gaza?
Evening to you and dear viewers. The internal pressures, in fact, never managed to form a real pressure factor to shape Netanyahu's policies in the ground. Netanyahu may go for a deal upon his chooses strategies that are more than confronting the resistance movements, but is targeting the Palestinian project and the Palestinian people, and targeting in Gaza, in particular, what is called the cleansing, ethnic cleansing. So is working about to try to expand the expelling environment that will contribute to what he wished to go for. Specifically, the reoccupying and the Gaza Strip enclave in total with the security grab to execute or to go in line with the ambitions and the aspirations and that is linked to the economic affairs, such as Bulgarian Canal and the framework as well.
Now, sir, delving into the Israeli government's internal divisions. So, Smotrich has denied Ben Gvir's demands for a further budget increase for the police. How do you view these major disagreements among Israeli government members in recent days?
There are just disagreements about the details, not just in the objective, such as Smotrich represents the extreme party in Netanyahu's capital, but the biggest extremist and the owner of ideology is Netanyahu itself. According to his famous book, Among the Nations, published in 1993, I mean around 3 decades from now. Therefore, is working at large to execute such a strategy that go in line with the far right wing that is trying to employ these far hardliners to execute his plans that he thinks that should be executed in addition to his personal goals. Therefore, all what we hear within the coalition inside the Israeli cabinet, just as for the abroad and domestically, go back to the agreement of the coalition. We found that all the parties have already signed to adopt the settlement plan presented by Smotrich, relying on the theory of division published in 2017. That says that Netanyahu basically is fully agreed up the steps made by Smotrich, but all the disagreements to be imported to the media purposely are attempts to run the conflict domestically and externally. And if he goes from their office, will be charged for corruption charges, and he has an international demand from the ICC, and he thinks that his future is subject to his staying in power. And I think that Netanyahu, even the Zionist project, as the Israeli and the Jewish people don't pay great attention for themselves, but they care only about the personality of Netanyahu, and that was very clear in his speech in the Congress by saying, I quote, "I can to execute whatever you think of any plans." I mean that he belongs to the European, Western American colonization project in the Middle East more than to the Zionist project, even if he used this project in achieving the colonization project and plans.
Now, sir, but moving to the state of the Israeli streets, could the public anger against Netanyahu over the delayed detainee release agreement end Netanyahu's rule?
This is a very good point. The Israeli public opinion talking about the necessity of releasing the hostages and their family never shape and a pressure step that would affect his policy. And the evidence that there was disagreement on Netanyahu's personality about the amendment of judicial system, and the people in the street and the division as well as the opposition were more than what we see now through movement that never managed to shape a different state about the policies of the cabinet, the Israeli cabinet. The government still controls the street, and the proof, even the case of the hostages in the public opinion in Israel in the past 2 weeks.
That was the writer and researcher Ahmed Zakarna. Thank you, sir, for being with us and for joining us here on Q News. Thank you so much for being with us. This brings us to the end of our special coverage on the Middle East. Remember to stay updated by following Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG for the latest developments, and thank you so much for watching.